They didn't shove me out with a shout. I wish they had. At least you can brace when somebody yells. No, it started the way small town betrayals usually do in the church basement under bad fluorescent lights with a stack of paper plates and that fake sweet tone women use when they've already decided who you are. The Harvest Drive sign-up sheet was taped to a folding table. Miss Carroll was pouring coffee out of the dented percolator like she'd been doing since Nixon. Vanessa breezed in 10 minutes late, sunglasses still on Evan trailing behind her like he was afraid to bump into a memory. She didn't look at me. Didn't have to. She set her Tupperware down like a stamp of ownership and said, "We'll take casseroles sides the big stuff. We don't want Rachel overdoing it. Overdoing it." As if I hadn't fed this town for 30 years. As if I hadn't stood in the hiss and heat of that diner kitchen 6 days a week, rolling biscuits at 5 a.m., knowing exactly who needed extra butter without being asked. It was the laugh that got me. Not loud. Just a quick little puff, the kind women use when they've already pushed you to the edges and want to see if you'll fall on your own. I smiled because I was raised to. Because my mother taught me you don't hand people a weapon they didn't earn. I signed my name in the leftover space nobody wanted, ice cups, napkins. The section they give to children and kindly forgetful men. Miss Carroll's eyes flicked over steady as a lighthouse. She slid an extra stack of plates toward me and said too loud, "I trust your judgment, Rachel." It was a small thing, but I felt it, a palm on the small of my back. That night, I locked up the diner, what's left of it. Just a sign and a shuttered door now since Hank passed, and I couldn't keep the griddle hot by myself. The parking lot still smells like coffee if the air sits right. You think I'm being sentimental, but the nose remembers what the heart denies. I stood under the faded Monroe's sign and watched the M flicker. "You still here?" I asked it. On the way home, I took the long route down River Road, past the bait shop with the crooked open sign and the old ball field where Evan used to miss fly balls and grin like it was charming. My Chevy rattled over the cattle guard. I could hear Hank in my head. "Don't baby it. Give it gas." He always hated when I eased around problems. He was right. I just wasn't ready to be the woman who didn't ease. You hear me? I wasn't ready. But the world doesn't ask if you're ready. It checks your pockets for softness and calls it kindness. The house felt too tidy when I walked in. Clean counters, quiet rooms. I set my keys down where Hank used to toss his, and they sounded wrong without his. You don't know the weight of a person until you hear the space they leave. I went to the study because I couldn't not. If grief is a river, my hands kept finding the same stones to rub smooth. Hank's desk still smelled like cedar and pencil shavings. Second drawer on the right stuck like always the way it had since 2004, when he jammed it with warranty manuals. I tugged, and there it was, the little cedar box I'd been pretending not to notice for months. It sat back in the shadow like a secret that already knew your name. For Rachel when you need it. Hank's handwriting, slanted stubborn the way he signed checks and birthday cards. I put my thumb under the lid, then took it away. I'm not dramatic. I don't fling open boxes and discover treasure with a gasp. I make lists. I put things in the freezer labeled with masking tape. I save foil. Still, that box made the house hum. Not loud, more like when your fridge kicks on at 3 a.m. and you realize you're not alone in your own kitchen. I left it closed. I'm not proud of that. I told myself I was tired. I told myself there was laundry in the dryer. I told myself a lot of things. 2 days later, Vanessa came by to check in. She brought one of those grocery store bouquets that smell like plastic and sugar. She didn't step fully over the threshold, just hovered eyes skimming past everything that looked like me. "We're worried," she said, tone like marshmallow fluff. "It's a lot of house. Holidays coming up. Maybe this year you let us handle Thanksgiving. We'll make it easy. Okay, Evan can pick you up." My son stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the mail slot. "Hey, Mom," he said like the word cost him something to say. He used to say it like a landing. He used to barrel into my booth at the diner after school and steal a fry and say it with his whole mouth. Hey, Mom. I keep those sounds like buttons in an old jar. Shake the jar enough you can hear a life. I'll be fine, I said. My voice came out smooth. It always does when I'm holding the doorframe to keep from shaking. I'll make my sweet potato casserole. Folks look for it. It'll be good to do. That's what we're saying, Vanessa smiled. Don't overdo. After they left, Miss Carroll called. She doesn't chit-chat. You at your sink? She asked. I was. Good, she said. I want you to look out the window and tell me what you see. Maple tree, I said. Bird feeder. Hank's shovel still leaning stupid against the fence because he always promised to fix the handle and never did. You see your life? She asked. I didn't answer. Your Hank wasn't a man who left things loose, she said. You know that. I know. So if you feel loose, that's not the end of the story. That's the middle. A pause. And middles aren't verdicts. Sometimes a sentence lands like a hand catching your elbow right before the stairs end. I stood there with the phone pressed to my cheek and the maple's shadow laying long across the yard, and I thought, this is not how my name is going to end. At the harvest drive, I brought cups and napkins like a good soldier. When the line got long, I drifted to the end of the buffet where the easy jobs end up. And there she was, little Millie from the community college, the kid who works the register at the bait shop on weekends. She blushed when she saw me like she'd been caught thinking. Ms. Monroe, she said, I made your biscuit recipe, the one you posted in the church newsletter last year. Mine don't look right, but my granddad cried when he ate one, so I guess the texture don't matter. I nearly lost my composure over a paper plate. Bring me one, I said. We'll fix it. She lit up like Christmas lights that actually work. Across the room, Vanessa laughed at something Pastor Jim said and clinked her glass with her ring a little bell. Every sound she made felt like claim staking. I kept my hands busy and my ears open. This is what women learn when they're not invited to the table you can still hear. Snippets floated over like pollen. Care home waiting list, someone whispered. That big old house. So sad, another voice said. But maybe she's, you know. A finger to a temple. A pitying shake. It would have broken me another year. Not this time. I pressed my palm flat against the table until the plastic bent and came back. Stay. Here. Stay. Miss Carroll materialized with her clipboard and her don't mess with God face. Vanessa, she called sweet as tea that hides the lemon's bite. Quick correction for the record, Rachel's name is still on the deed for the diner lot. Mine too, as trustee. In case anyone's asking who's capable of what around here. Silence. Pastor Jim cleared his throat like a tractor trying to start. We're blessed by folks who built this place, he said. Let's act like it. You ever feel a room shift half an inch and think, oh, there you are? That's what it felt like. Not victory. Not yet. Just the floor coming back to level under my shoes. I drove home in the early dark. The Chevy groaned over the hill and sighed like it wanted a nap. I reached across the bench seat and patted the cracked vinyl. I hear you, I said. We'll get through. A sheriff's cruiser idled at the corner near the old feed store. Deputy Lee Kid I watched learn to tie his shoes in my booth tipped 2 fingers off his cap. Evenin', Ms. Monroe, he called. Watch that north turn. Gravel's tricky. Small towns never forget your name. They just forget your weight. You have to remind them without shouting. Back at the house, I didn't turn on any lamps. The living room knows me. I can walk it by memory 3 steps to the rug edge, half step to miss the creaky board, hand out to the chair Hank used to fall asleep in with the ball game humming low. I sat and listened to the dark talk back. When you're alone long enough, you hear the house breathing. It's not sad. Just proof you're not the only thing holding yourself up. I got up, went to the study, and took the cedar box out like it weighed less than it did. I set it down, ran my thumb over the lid. Not tonight, I said to no one, and to Hank, and to the woman I used to be. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled down the recipe box with the busted hinge and wrote a new card in blue ink Millie's Biscuits Fix with buttermilk and patience. I tucked it up front before all my old favorites. A little rebellion you could miss if you weren't looking. Here's what I didn't know then, but I can tell you now. The first step back to yourself doesn't look like a speech. It looks like writing your name on a line nobody wanted and deciding that's not where your story ends. It looks like a kid handing you a lumpy biscuit and a friend announcing your dignity into a microphone you didn't ask for. It looks like a cedar box waiting for the night you're brave enough to open it. Stick around because this is the part where the ground starts shifting under the people who thought I wouldn't move. And do me a favor, drop a quick comment with where you're watching from. I want to see how far a small town like ours can carry a story like this. You ever watch someone try to take something from you without saying it out loud? They don't grab, they don't shout, they just start moving pieces around. So one day you look up and realize you're not holding the same hand you thought you were. That's what it felt like after the harvest drive. Evan didn't stop by for coffee anymore. Vanessa stopped calling entirely. But my phone started buzzing with texts that didn't sound like family, more like business. Hey Mom, do you still have the original deed for the diner lot? We might be able to help you streamline the paperwork. Vanessa was thinking we should go through your mail for you, just to take the stress off. Stress. That was their word for it. Not grief. Not adjustment. Not, hey, we know you've been through hell losing Dad. Just stress. Like I was some old porch beam starting to rot, and they were deciding whether to patch me or tear me out. I didn't answer most of those messages. I've learned silence makes people show you their next card faster than words do. 2 weeks later, I ran into Miss Carol at the post office. She had that look, chin-up lips pressed together, that meant she'd heard something. I've been in that clerk's office for 32 years, Rachel, she said, tapping her finger on the counter while we waited in line. You'd be amazed what folks say when they think the person holding the files doesn't have ears. What'd you hear? I asked, keeping my voice flat. She leaned in. Vanessa's been sniffing around about your property taxes, asking if it's possible for a relative to get co-ownership in case of emergency. I almost laughed right there in front of the P.O. boxes. Not because it was funny, because it was so stupidly obvious. Vanessa wasn't worried about an emergency. She was building one. Miss Carol put her hand on my arm. If I were you, I'd start putting things where they can't reach them. That night, I went to the diner's old storage unit. The lock was stiff, same as my knees when the weather turns. Inside smelled like fryer oil and cardboard years of our life stacked in dusty towers. I was looking for Hank's old coffee urn, thought maybe I'd loan it to the church, but I found something else. In the back, behind a stack of mismatched chairs, was a banker's box with my name written in Hank's handwriting. I dragged it out, tore the tape with my keys. On top was a manila folder labeled Cabin Rachel's copy. I had to sit down on a busted stool. The papers inside were clean, crisp, and clear as daylight, a property deed to a lakeside cabin 20 minutes outside town. My name. Mine alone. Purchased 5 years ago. I had no memory of signing a thing. Hank must have gone to Miss Carol's office without me handled it quiet. That was his way fix the roof while you're still looking at the wallpaper. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat like a passenger itself. Didn't tell a soul. Not yet. The next Sunday at church, Pastor Jim asked if I could help set up the fellowship hall for potluck. I said yes. Midway through, while I was wrestling with one of those folding tables that likes to pinch your hands, little Millie from the bait shop sidled up with a stack of hymnals. She whispered, Ms. Monroe. Vanessa was in here last week talking to my aunt. Said she's worried you're not up for all the decision-making anymore. Aunt Bonnie said she should mind her own. Then Vanessa said, it'll all work out, one way or another. That last part hit me like cold water. One way or another isn't something you say about care. It's something you say about conquest. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I started documenting instead every odd question, every visit that felt more like inventory than family. I kept a spiral notebook in the kitchen drawer next to the scissors. dates, times, exact words. And I made 2 trips to see Miss Carroll, each time bringing coffee and pie like I was just catching up. She knew what I was doing. She didn't mind. On my second visit, she leaned back in her chair, folded her hands. If they're trying to box you in, Rachel, you'd better make sure you're standing in the doorway when they close it. That way you can slam it yourself. Here's the thing. No one tells you the silent struggle is harder than the blow-up. When someone shouts, at least you know where you stand. But when they smile and call you mom while moving their queen into position, you've got to play a longer game. I didn't know exactly what Hank had been planning when he bought that cabin or why he kept it quiet. But standing there with those papers in my hands, I could feel it. This wasn't just real estate. It was an escape hatch. A line in the sand he'd drawn for me before I even knew I'd need one. Stick with me, because the day I finally opened Hank's cedar box, that's the day all the cards hit the table. And if you've ever had someone think they could write you out of your own life, you'll want to hear what came next. Drop me a comment with how you found this story. I like knowing who's sitting at the table with me tonight. Christmas Eve isn't supposed to feel like a test, but that's exactly what it was. I'd been basting the ham, the good one, from the butcher in Millbrook, and the whole house smelled like brown sugar and cloves. I'd even pulled out Hank's old vinyl of Nat King Cole, letting it pop and crackle through the speakers like it used to. I was doing my best to make it feel like a holiday. At 6:14 p.m., headlights slid across my living room wall. My first thought, maybe Miss Carroll decided to surprise me with pie. But when I peeked through the curtains, I saw Evan's truck idling at the curb, exhaust hanging in the cold air. Vanessa was in the passenger seat, phone in hand, scrolling like she was waiting in a dentist's office instead of my driveway. They sat there for a full minute before Evan got out. When I opened the door, he had on that half smile he uses when he's about to sell you something you didn't ask for. "Hey, Mom," he said. Vanessa didn't get out. Just gave me a 2-finger wave through the glass. I let him in, poured coffee. We did the small talk, dance, weather, traffic, how the hardware store is doing since it changed owners. Then, like he'd been waiting for the moment I set my cup down, Evan leaned forward. "So Vanessa and I have been talking. We think it might be time to sell this place. It's a lot for you to keep up with. We could get you into something easier, closer to us." Now, in most families, that might sound caring, but I knew better. Vanessa's been circling the idea of streamlining my life for months, always with an eye on the property. And not because she's worried about my well-being, it's because she's got some real estate projects in the works. I've heard enough whispers around town to know she's been overextended for a while. My house, it's equity with a bow on it. I didn't answer him right away. I just stood, told him I needed a minute, and walked to the study. Because I knew exactly what I needed to do. That cedar box had been waiting in Hank's desk since before he passed. I'd touched it a dozen times, always telling myself not yet. But tonight, it was yet. I pried the lid open. Inside was Hank's handwriting on a folded letter, legal papers neatly clipped together, and one document that made my hands go cold, a notarized statement that said in no uncertain terms, if any family member tried to declare me incompetent or interfere with my property, they'd be cut out of his estate completely. No appeals, no loopholes. At the bottom, in Hank's steady block letters, was a line that hit me harder than the legalese. "For when they forget who you are." I took the box back to the living room and set it between us. "Evan," I said, "there's something you should see." He skimmed the first page like it was no big deal, until it was. His face shifted, color-draining eyes flicking up to mine. Vanessa must have seen the change, because suddenly she was at the door, stepping inside for the first time all evening. And that's when I decided not to hold back. "I also know about the check," I said. "The one made out to that contractor in Knoxville with my signature. Problem is, I never signed it." Vanessa froze. Evan looked down at his hands. "I've got the bank copy," I continued, "and a statement. Sheriff Dale's already seen them. I was just giving you the chance to be honest before this got uglier." Vanessa's voice went high. "It's not what you think," I cut her off. Oh, it's exactly what I think, and you know it. The room went so quiet, I could hear the old kitchen clock ticking. Evan finally stood up, shoving his hands in his jacket pockets. We just wanted to help. No, I said, standing too. You wanted to help yourselves. And now, you're going to leave my house tonight. They didn't slam the door. They just left headlights fading down the road, which somehow felt worse. I sat back down and read Hank's letter again. He'd known. He'd seen this coming long before I did, and he'd made sure I had a way to fight without begging anyone for permission. Here's the thing: they thought they could corner me while I was alone. They forgot that Hank left me with more than a house and memories. He left me with an escape plan they'll never touch. You think that was the end? No. Because the moment this town found out what they'd tried to pull, that's when the real cracks started to show. Stay with me for part 4 when the whispers stopped being behind my back and started following them into every room. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone try to disguise greed as help? I'm curious how you spotted it. It's funny how news moves in a small town. You think secrets travel fastest, but the truth moves quicker when it's the kind that makes people whisper. Well, 3 days after Christmas, I was walking into Miller's grocery for eggs and bread when Mrs. Tully from the Quilt Guild stopped me in the freezer aisle. She leaned in like the peas and frozen hash browns were going to spill my business. I heard, she said. Just that. Heard what I asked, though I already knew. Her eyebrows lifted. About Evan and Vanessa, trying to push you out. Shameful. By the time I reached the register, 2 other people had given me that same knowing look. And that's when it clicked: Miss Carroll had been busy. She's not the kind to spread gossip, but she is the kind to make sure folks are informed. Vanessa must have felt the shift because she called me the next afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was all sugar. Rachel, I think we got off on the wrong foot over the holidays. Let's sit down, talk things through. Translation: the wind's changing, and she wants to get in front of it. The real reason behind all this was plain as day now: money. Vanessa had overextended herself on some big investment properties, and she thought my house was the lifeline. Evan. He just followed her lead, probably telling himself it was for the family. Instead of calling her back, I called Sheriff Dale. He's known me since high school, rode the same bus, played football with Hank. I asked him straight up if the check forgery report was still active. It is, he said. And Rachel? Folks like them, they back off when they realize you're not scared. You're not scared, are you? Not anymore, I told him. That week, I drove out to the lakeside cabin Hank had bought in my name. I'd only been inside once since finding the deed, but this time I came with a purpose. The place smelled faintly of cedar and lake water, and the sun hit the kitchen just right through the east window. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures every room, every corner. I sent them to Miss Carroll with one line, thinking of making this my new headquarters. Within days, she had half the churchwomen over there helping clean paint and haul in furniture. By the second Saturday, we'd turned that quiet cabin into something alive. The first night we had everyone over, it wasn't fancy, just chili cornbread and sweet tea. But every seat was full. People brought desserts, laughter, and noise. The good kind of noise, the kind that bounces off the walls and makes a place feel claimed. Halfway through the night, I caught Millie, the girl from the bait shop, standing by the door with her plate. "This is nice," she said. "Feels like family." I nodded. That's the idea. Meanwhile, Evan and Vanessa kept their distance. I heard they tried to smooth things over with a few folks, saying it was all a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The people they'd counted on to nod along were suddenly busy looking the other way. And me, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. Not the way they imagined, smaller, quieter, tucked under someone else's control, but on my own terms. Here's the reversal they didn't see coming. Every month now, I host a dinner at that cabin. Sometimes it's church folks, sometimes the Quilting Guild, sometimes the young kids from the community college who just need a place to sit and eat without spending a dime. The same woman they tried to push out of her own life She's the one people are showing up for. The best part. Last week, as I was locking up after a dinner, Sheriff Dale handed me an envelope. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. Inside was a short note from the DA's office, formal, polite, but crystal clear. "The matter of the forged check has been reviewed. Evidence remains on file should further action be required." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just folded it neatly, put it in Hank's cedar box, and thought, let them wonder if I'll use it. Stick around for part 5 because a year later, I finally understood Hank's last lesson. And it had nothing to do with money. And tell me in the comments, if you had a place nobody could take from you, what would you do with it? I'm curious. 1 year later, same calendar date, same winter air, but my life didn't look anything like it did last Christmas. The cabin wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was home. And that morning, it smelled like cinnamon rolls, sausage gravy, and the faint bite of coffee that had been brewing since 6 a.m. You know it's going to be a good day when the kitchen counters are already crowded with crockpots and covered dishes before the sun's fully up. I'd gotten up early to roll out biscuits the way Hank used to, like them flaky enough to break apart with your hands soft enough to melt in your mouth. By 10 o'clock, I had Della in my kitchen bossing 2 teenagers around like she was running a military operation. She had them basting the ham and checking the cornbread stuffing every 5 minutes. Millie was in the corner, folding cloth napkins into little Christmas tree shapes she'd found on YouTube. By the time people started arriving, the cabin felt like it was breathing. Coats on hooks, boots on the mat, voices overlapping. Every seat was taken, and I'd already dragged out the folding card table for the overflow. I remember standing there for a second, leaning against the doorframe, just watching. Last year, I'd stood in my old living room staring at 2 empty chairs across from me, the table set for people who'd never planned on showing up. This year, I was wondering if I even had enough chairs to go around. That difference, it's not luck, it's choice. 3 days earlier, a cream-colored envelope had shown up in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Evans. Inside was a store-bought Christmas card with a photo of some generic snow-covered pine trees. The message inside read, "Merry Christmas, Rachel. Hope you're doing well." Signed by both him and Vanessa. No apology, no acknowledgement of last year, just a polite, empty sentence. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even get angry. I slid it into a drawer with old utility manuals and moved on to peeling sweet potatoes. Because when you stop waiting for someone to show up, their absence doesn't cut the same way. The guests kept coming, each one bringing something with them: pie, cider, cornbread, a big pot of chili. Pastor Jim arrived with his wife carrying a crock pot in one hand and a jar of homemade pickles in the other. Even Sheriff Dale came by with a pecan pie from the bakery in town. He had something else with him too, a little wooden frame. Inside was a photo from the diner years back. Me and Hank behind the counter, him holding a spatula like it was a trophy. Me laughing so hard my head was thrown back. "Found this cleaning out the old station files," Dale said. "Thought you ought to have it." I put it right on the mantel next to the cabin's wood stove. Didn't say much, just nodded, but I felt the difference. A year ago, people looked at me with pity. Now they looked at me like someone who'd weathered a storm and was still standing. If you want the truth, Evan and Vanessa's scheme was never just about money. It was about control. Controlling my decisions, my home, my independence. That's why the silence from them always felt heavy. It was part of the plan. Keep me isolated enough I'd be easier to steer. They underestimated one thing: I wasn't alone. Not because I had dozens of people fighting for me, but because I had the right few. Miss Carroll, who kept her ears open in the clerk's office. Della, who showed up with her binder of legal templates the minute she sensed trouble. Even Millie, who brought me her failed biscuits that first night, reminding me I still had value in someone else's eyes. They chipped away at that isolation until there wasn't anything left for Evan and Vanessa to grab onto. When dessert rolled around, the younger crowd decided to go outside and start a snowball fight. The rest of us stayed inside, sipping cider and picking over the last crumbs of pecan pie. I poured myself a glass of red wine and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold enough to bite, but the sound of laughter carried across the lake. I stood there listening to it and thought about Hank, about that cedar box in his desk, about the cabin deed in my name, about the line he'd written for when they forget who you are. He hadn't just been talking about Evan and Vanessa. He was talking about me, about not letting betrayal or grief whittle me down into someone smaller than I really was. Before everyone left, I tapped my glass for a second and said, "You don't have to be born into a family to belong at their table." The room went quiet for a beat, and then Della raised her fork and said, "Amen to that." And then the talking started up again like it had never stopped. No big speech, no drama, just a room full of people who'd earned their seats. Later, after the last dish was washed and the leftovers were tucked into the fridge, I sat down by the mantel with that framed photo. I looked at my younger self laughing in that diner kitchen and realized something the real inheritance Hank left me wasn't the cabin or the trust. It wasn't even the legal safeguards to keep greedy hands away. It was the reminder that I get to choose who sits at my table. So if Evan and Vanessa want to send me a card every year from somewhere far away, let them. I'm too busy cooking for people who actually show up. And here's the twist no one expected a week after Christmas. Miss Carroll stopped by with coffee and a folder. Turns out one of Vanessa's investment properties was up for sale, except the title search dug up some issues she hadn't planned on. "She'll have to deal with that herself," Miss Carroll said, eyes twinkling. Ain't that something? I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. Life has a way of serving its own kind of justice. So that's my lesson. You can't make people care. You can't force them to show up. But you can make sure that when they don't, you've got a table full of folks who will. And if you take nothing else from my story, take this. Your worth isn't decided by who leaves, it's proven by who stays. Sometimes the hardest part of standing up for yourself isn't the fight, it's admitting to yourself that you need to. Especially when the people pushing you down are the same ones who used to sit at your table. This story wasn't just about property or money. It was about control. About someone else deciding what you were capable of without asking. And the truth is, silence can be just as dangerous as shouting because it lets people think you agree. The real turning point came when Rachel stopped waiting for them to value her and started valuing herself. She built a new table, filled it with people who actually showed up, and let go of the ones who didn't. That's not bitterness. That's survival. And it's a kind of love for yourself that no one can take away. Family isn't defined by blood last names or holiday cards. It's defined by presence. By who stands with you when things get hard. By who celebrates with you when you win, not just when it benefits them. So if you've been holding on waiting for someone to change, maybe it's worth asking, what could you build if you stopped waiting? If this story reminded you of something in your own life, I'd love to hear it. You never know who might feel less alone because you spoke up. Leave a comment if you've ever had to face the truth about someone you thought you could count on. And if this touched your heart, tap the like button and subscribe for more stories that speak to the moments we don't always talk about. Whatever you're going through, remember you deserve to feel safe, seen, and free.